This weekend is the final UFC card of the year, also the final card of the ESPN era, and it's not the greatest card on paper, kind of your typical Apex fight night, but we've got to enjoy it because UFC 324 is over a month away, so there's a long layoff, final card. Hopefully it's a banger. Going to be going through my full card predictions, main card, and the prelims, breaking down every single matchup. Timestamps will be in the description if you guys want to jump around to certain fights. But let's dive right into the first prelim matchup. Women's flyweight, we have Tereza Bleda taking on Jamey-Lyn Horth. This fight was originally supposed to go down in June. Bleda had to pull out. Horth got Vanessa Demopoulos as a short notice replacement and made pretty easy work of her. I believe it went the distance, but not a super competitive fight. Bleda has not fought since June of 2023. She's 1-1 in the UFC, but the one loss was to Natalia Silva, who's pretty much like one win away from fighting for the belt. So if you're going to lose to someone, like losing to Natalia Silva, not the worst thing in the world. She's a super legit contender in this weight class. Bleda is a very solid grappler. In her Contender Series win, she racked up 11 minutes of control time. In her one UFC win against Gabriela Fernandez, who's now on a 3-fight win streak since that fight, she also racked up 11 minutes of control time. She's a pretty big, physically imposing 125er, 5'9", with a 71-inch reach. On the other side with Jamey-Lyn Horth, like I mentioned, coming off that win against Vanessa Demopoulos, she is 3-2 in the UFC. Also a pretty big 125er, so like two of the bigger women in this weight class. I think the issue with Horth is that she has really kind of struggled to create margins in fights where typically she wants to be standing, wants to be at range, striking, but she doesn't have much danger factor on the feet, not a ton of finishing upside anywhere, and then her grappling has been a little bit questionable. We've seen in some of her recent fights that she can be controlled against Miranda Maverick, 7 minutes of control time against Petrovic, 8 minutes of control time, Haley Cowan, 5 minutes of control. And so just in a matchup where I do think Bleda is going to come in, use the grappling, I think she's going to get that control time, bank some rounds. So I'm going to pick Bleda to win this one by decision. Up at heavyweight, we've got Alan Frye taking on Guilherme Pat. Both of these guys making their UFC debuts. Both are undefeated coming into this matchup. Frye 6-0. All his wins have come by knockout. To be totally honest with you guys, it was tough for me to find like good footage of him. I found like his most recent fight, but it was like recorded, at least it seemed like it was recorded from like a cell phone through the cage. So certainly less than ideal. It was against like a UFC veteran, Justin Frazier, but he had like one UFC fight, lost it, and then he was on like I think it was a 6-year layoff. So honestly, I don't have, a ton to take away from Frye. At least in the clips that I saw, he did seem to be in pretty decent shape, and then also seemed pretty composed in the matchup against Frazier that I did see. On the other side with Pat, he's like the rare regional heavyweight that is actually in really good shape. Like this dude is 6'5", 80.5-inch reach, so he has that big frame, but also just not a lard, right? Like he's ripped, in good shape, coming off a pretty grueling win in the LFA. He's 5-0. 4 of his wins have come by knockout. He did some really nice work in the clinch in that LFA fight, really just jacked up the dude's nose with a nasty elbow. He uses that frame, can land solid kicks out at range. I think the one issue for Pat is he doesn't fight with a ton of urgency. Like in that LFA fight, he had that dude hurt bad, and he was very willing to kind of just wait on the outside, a little bit too accepting of the clinch. This is a fight where we don't have a ton of information on either guy. I'm going to slightly lean towards Pat. I do just think he has looked like the better athlete from what I've seen out of these two dudes. And at heavyweight, if you do have just like that freakish athleticism, that like big, strong build, you're going to do well in a lot of matchups, even if you might not be like the most skilled or experienced guy in the world. So I'm going to go with Pat by round 2 KO. At women's bantamweight, we have Luana Santos taking on Melissa Croden. Santos is a pretty impressive grappler. She is 4-1 in the UFC, 2 wins by submission, 1 by knockout in her last fight. I actually think I picked against her in this fight. Clearly the wrong call because she went out, she dominated Tainara Lisboa on the ground, ended up getting the win by Americana. She's fine on the feet, but like she really wants to get this fight to the ground, especially in this specific matchup. Like her success in this fight is going to be through the grappling. We saw Melissa Croden have a really fun UFC debut. Actually, funny enough, Her last opponent in her debut was also Lisboa, who we saw Santos beat. And man, Croden is just an absolute dog. She presses forward. She pushes a pace. She was kind of picking on the outside in the first round, but like the second half of round 2, she really just started putting the pressure on Lisboa, started landing some big shots. She's nasty in the clinch, some solid ground and pound. Also has a pretty big frame for the weight class. I want to say she's like maybe in her mid-30s, but like her skill set is still fairly raw, especially on the feet. Like from a technical perspective, she can kind of overextend, kind of throw over that foot. And she was taken down twice in her UFC debut. So I think the big question in this matchup is just, can Croden stop the takedowns? If she can keep this thing standing, defend takedowns, kind of wear on Santos, I think she could have a lot of success in this matchup. I just don't fully trust her to just stuff the takedowns. I think Santos is going to have success in the grappling, and I think she picks up a decision win. In this next matchup, we have another heavyweight fight between Sharaf and Steven Asplund. Probably butchered both of those names. I apologize. For Sharaf here, had a short notice debut against Junior Tafa. Looked fine in the first round, had some grappling going, but ended up getting knocked out in the second round. He did go 1 for 8 on takedown, so didn't have a ton of success, but like once you rack up any control time against some of these like bigger heavyweights, you have a decent shot of banking the round. But we did see after the grappling heavy round 1, he really faded in round 2. Both dudes honestly were super tired in that fight. Not a super pretty watch between those two. Pre-UFC debut, he was 4-0. All 4 of his wins had come by knockout, but his opponents had a combined record of 4-6-1. So we just haven't seen a lot. Wouldn't say I'm overly high on Sharaf at this point. For Steven, he is making his UFC debut, 6-1 as a pro, 5 wins by knockout, had a 16-second knockout on the Contender Series. He's a big heavyweight. I want to say this guy previously was like, might have been like 400 plus pounds, but he's a big dude, 6'5", 78-inch reach. Has gotten, he's not in amazing shape. When you're that big at one point, you're not going to look super ripped, but at least somewhat respectable. He's a better athlete at heavyweight than he'd look, just kind of given his size. And then his only loss as a pro has come to Denzel Freeman, who didn't have a super impressive UFC debut, but did pick up a win. It wasn't a great fight, but he did get his hand raised. He's an aggressive striker, really mixes up his shots on the feet, got some good diversity there. And then, like I mentioned, he is just a better athlete than you'd expect, just given a quick look at him. I am not expecting the cleanest, most technical fight here. We got a guy debuting at heavyweight, someone who's 0-1. Typically, these fights aren't the prettiest, but I am leaning towards Steven Asplund here, so I'm going to pick him by round 2 knockout. Now getting into some interesting matchups. You got Neil Magny taking on Yaroslav Amosov. It's a welterweight matchup. And man, starting off with Neil Magny here, he will just not quit. The man will not die. He's coming off of back-to-back comeback wins against Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos and then Jake Matthews. Magny just thrives in like these grappling heavy clinch fest where he's able to just kind of ride out rounds, wear on his opponents, and then recently like kind of pull away in round 2 and round 3. And like he's 4-3 in his last 7, but he's really just found some success against the non-elites of the weight class. Like 4-3 in his last 7, his losses have come to Carlos Prates, Michael Morales, and Ian Gary. Like you can make the case that those are like the 3 most deserving guys for a title shot. Shavkat should probably be in there also, but like those are all guys who have cases for a title shot. Those are his 3 losses in his last 7. Everyone else, like these guys in the fringe top 15, like the 15 to 20 range, he is just beating these dudes, and he's kind of got like a similar method to victory where he'll grapple, they'll grapple him early in the first round, and then he just wears on them. They get tired, and he's able to find the finish. In like the second or the third, we saw that against Zaleski dos Santos, Jake Matthews. Also, the Mike Malott fight comes to mind there. On the other side, though, with Amosov, this is his UFC debut. Someone that Bellator was really high on. He's 28-1 as a pro, 8-1 in Bellator, had 2 title wins, still only 32 years old, so like arguably could just be entering his fighting prime. And I don't love this for Magny because Amosov also has a very grappling heavy style. He wears on his opponents. He has very good cardio. He has multiple 5-round decision wins. And so I just don't think like the typical Neil Magny kind of grinded out game plan is going to work on Amosov. And I just think at this point in their careers, Amosov is the better fighter. So I think he's got the skill set to win this one. I'm going to pick him to win by decision. Hopefully he comes in, has a fun fight. Wouldn't say he was known for being the most entertaining guy in Bellator, but we'll see what he looks like here in the UFC. Now moving down to featherweight, we've got Joanderson Brito taking on Melsik Baghdasaryan. Joanderson Brito started his UFC career 5-1. That was after losing his debut. So he had 5 straight wins, all finishes, and like against some pretty solid competition. Had finishes against Jack Shore, Jonathan Pierce, Andre Fili. He's a super explosive athlete. He's finished 15 of his 17 wins, 7 by knockout, 8 by submission. In the UFC alone, he has wins by ninja choke, rear naked choke, overhand right. He got a finish from like a leg kick where he cut the dude's leg so bad. That was the Jack Shore fight. And then also like ground and pound out of a heel hook attempt from Weston Wilson. So he's got a lot you have to worry about. We did see in his most recent fight, he was dominated on the ground by Pat Sabatini. Sabatini went 4 for 5 on takedowns, racked up 14 minutes of control time. So that's not great, but I don't think that's really an area that's going to get tested here against Baghdasaryan. Baghdasaryan's 3-2 in the UFC, coming off a KO loss against Jean Silva. He's a fun striker. He's got great kicks, like I mentioned. Not really going to bring a grappling threat into this matchup. I don't think he's landed a single takedown in his UFC career. He's had kind of a weird career arc where he made his MMA debut all the way back in 2014, lost it. He then did not fight again until 2019, at least in MMA, where he went 4-0. The longest fight lasted 32 seconds. Then he got a Contender Series fight off of that, picked up the win there. And then he's had 5 UFC fights, mixed results, some ups and downs, but overall, he's looked solid. I just think in this matchup, there's going to be a real athleticism advantage in the favor of Joanderson Brito. He's a freaky athlete. He is super explosive. And I think Brito's going to be able to, I think he can find the finish on the feet. I also think he could work his grappling in this matchup. So I'm going to go with Joanderson Brito, round 1 KO. I think he gets it done early. If he does finish fights, typically it's early on where he has all that explosiveness. And I honestly think he could do it on the feet or on the ground, right? He could catch him, land the big shot standing, or I think he could land some big ground and pound and find the finish there. One of the more interesting fights, I think, on this card, I think this probably should be on the main. We've got Amanda Lemos taking on Gillian Robertson. This is definitely a matchup that seems to favor Gillian. Amanda Lemos, she's a super dangerous striker, pretty rough as a grappler. She's gone 4-4 in her last 8. She's been out-grappled in all 4 losses. She was submitted in round 1 by Jessica Andrade and Virna Jandiroba, and then Wei Li and Tatiana Suarez combined for 25 total minutes of control time in their wins against Lemos. But she is super dangerous on the feet. She knocked out Marina Rodriguez. She actually picked up a decision win against Mackenzie Dern, where she was able to kind of mitigate the grappling, hurt her badly on the feet. So the striking looked good in that matchup. She's a super dangerous matchup if you cannot get her to the ground. Gillian Robertson, though, might have some success there. She is 5-1 since moving down to 115. She has finished 3 of those wins. She is the most submission wins by a woman in UFC history with 7. She's a very good control grappler, but also a legitimate submission threat. She also is very active ground and pound. She's 13-6 in the UFC and has a pretty crazy high finish rate. She's finished 10 of her 13 wins in the UFC. And then up at 125, her wrestling was a little bit hit or miss, but now that she's more going up against women her size, she's a lot more reliable as a wrestler at 115. She's fairly limited on the feet. She's fine, but she's not going to do a ton of damage there. And I do think if this is just a pure stand-up fight, I think Lemos is just going to carve her up. I just think I have to lean towards Gillian Robertson getting her grappling going. That is her strength. She's found a lot of success at 115, and that has been a massive issue for Amanda Lemos. So I'm going to pick Gillian Robertson. I'm going to say she gets it done by round 2 submission. She is a finisher. I think she can kind of wear on Lemos and end up finding the finish in round 2. Got another heavyweight fight here. Definitely heavy on the heavyweights with this card. Kennedy Nzechukwu taking on Marcus Buchecha. Both of these guys, honestly, are coming off of pretty disappointing losses. I picked Kennedy Nzechukwu to beat Walter Walker. He then got heel hooked in 54 seconds. I still think he's a pretty like high level athlete for this weight class. He's 6'5" with an 83-inch reach, has some power. He was 2-0 previously since moving up to heavyweight, but like very, very weak competition. He is tough to trust. Like the durability is somewhat of a question mark. The output, you also can't really bank on it. Sometimes he can go out and be aggressive. Other times he can just be overly passive. On the other side with Buchecha, he is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Martin Buday in his UFC debut. He has elite jiu-jitsu. He is an IBJJF Hall of Famer, but he's kind of like that, super credentialed jiu-jitsu player who comes into the UFC and just doesn't have the full, like, well-rounded skill set. The striking didn't look great. The wrestling didn't look legitimate enough either to, like, consistently use his submission game. He went 1 for 11 on takedowns, did find like some control time, but was unable to land the submission against Buday. And then after round 1, where he did win that round, he just kind of faded and like didn't look great on the feet, still looked pretty raw there. He transitioned to MMA in 2020. Now he's got a 5-2 record. He is a big heavyweight, like 6'3", 80-inch reach, weighed in at 254 in his debut. To be totally honest, I don't trust either of these dudes. Like, Kennedy is just so hit or miss. Buchecha just doesn't have like that well-rounded skill set. I'm going to lean towards Nzechukwu here. I think he kind of weathers an early storm, ends up finding a late finish in the third. But like if Buchecha just went out there when he was fresh, explosive, got the early takedown, found a submission, I also would not be shocked with that result. Seems like 145 has some of the fun matchups on this card. Morgan Charriere taking on Melky Costa. Charriere, 3-2 UFC record, explosive striker. All 3 of his wins have come by knockout. He's finished 16 of his 21 pro wins, 13 by KO, 3 by sub. And then even his losses in the UFC have been pretty competitive against Nathaniel Wood and Chepe Mariscal. We have seen him in some of those decisions kind of fade late in fights. And it kind of felt like that's what was going to happen against Nate Landwehr in his most recent fight, where he, got the win in the round 1. Round 2 started to shift towards Landwehr, and it's like, all right, this is what happens. Landwehr, he kind of weathers an early storm. Then he builds. He won round 2. He's probably going to go out and, have a big round 3. And Charriere went out there. He was super aggressive to start the round and ended up just knocking out Nate Landwehr. I want to say in like the first 30 seconds of that third round. So good to see him kind of go against a previous tendency he had in some of his losses. On the other side with Costa, he's just a tough out. 5-2 UFC record, 5-0 in his fights at 145, 4 straight wins. He's well-rounded, solid striker, 7 career knockouts, dangerous grappler, 8 career submission wins. Both of his UFC finishes have come by submission. He's got great cardio. He's coming off a fight of the night win against Julian Erosa. I think the big question is just, can Charriere keep this fight standing? I'm expecting this to be a pretty competitive fight. I think this could be one of those matchups where Charriere has the good round 1, round 2 kind of hit or miss. Maybe Costa kind of pulls away in the second half of the round. And then round 3, you're leaning more towards Costa having some success there. I think his ability to mix it up, use the grappling, kind of wear on the gas tank of Charriere is going to lead him to a win here. So I'm going to pick Melky Costa to win by decision. Really fun matchup up next here in middleweight. We have Cesar Almeida taking on Cezary Oleksiejczuk. For Almeida, he is a kickboxer converted to MMA. 3-1 record so far in the UFC, coming off an insane comeback win against Abdul Razak Al Hassan. He was dropped badly in the first round. Then I want to say like less than a minute later, ended up putting Al Hassan out cold. We've seen Almeida definitely struggle in the grappling department. Before the Al Hassan fight, where there wasn't a takedown landed, he had been taken out at least 3 times in all 4 of his fights. So that includes 3 UFC fights and then the Contender Series matchup also. And then it's not like he's fully pulling away on the feet either. Like, he has actually been dropped in 2 of his last 3 fights, which is not ideal, right? Like, if your narrow path to victory is just keeping it standing and winning there, but you're also not dominant in that area, there are certainly some question marks there for Almeida. On the other side here with Oleksiejczuk, he's a really interesting kind of addition to this weight class. He is Mikhail Oleksiejczuk's younger brother. I think he's only 25 years old. This is going to be his UFC debut. Had a super quick win on the Contender Series, 36-second knockout, 16-3 record, 9 wins by knockout, 2 by sub. He's got this rangy frame. He's a southpaw striker, really nice jab, powerful left hand. What also stuck out to me is like someone who's pretty young, 25 years old, had a lot of finishing success. He's got some very solid finishing instincts on the feet, but he's also very patient where if he hurts someone, he doesn't just go super reckless and run in, kind of exactly what Abdul Razak Al Hassan did against Almeida. He's a lot more patient. He stays composed in there. Definitely a good trait to see out of a younger fighter. So I lean towards Oleksiejczuk here. Maybe prime for prime. Almeida's the better striker, but Almeida's 37 years old. A lot of mileage on the gas tank. I think Oleksiejczuk is just the fresher, better athlete. I think he gets the win by knockout. I could see kind of a feel out round 1. I think he ends up finding the KO in the second round. Believe this is the co-main event here. Giga Chikadze taking on Kevin Vallejos at 145. Giga's career has just kind of stalled over the last 3 years. He started 7-0 in the UFC, was riding a 3-fight finish streak. Since 2022, he has gone 1-3, his only win coming against Alex Caceres. He's a great kickboxer, uses that long frame, 6 foot tall, 74-inch reach, does have some very clean technique out at range, but he really only thrives in that one specific fight, that pretty kind of kickboxing, rangy matchup where the opponent just kind of lets him pick at them. We've seen his recent losses, right? Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen, David Onama, they all in different ways kind of made the fight dirty. Calvin Kattar got to his gas tank early on, finding the early takedown. I think it was off of a slip from Giga. Arnold Allen just really applied the pressure, didn't go super grappling heavy, just really pressured him on the feet, won rounds 2 and 3. And then David Onama did go to that grappling and had some success there. He's also aging, 37 years old, hasn't been super active, going up against a young stud prospect here in Vallejos, who is 16-1. Only career loss came against Jean Silva on the Contender Series. Believe he's still only 23 years old. 11 KO wins, 2 submission wins. Really impressive boxing. Hits hard on the feet. Very compact, doesn't overextend. A technical striker. He picked up a round 1 KO in his UFC debut, and then his most recent win was a decision W against Danny Silva. Good to see he had the cardio, the ability to go all 3 rounds. He looked good in that matchup. I'm expecting Vallejos to come out, really crowd Giga, kind of make him uncomfortable, put a lot of pressure on him. I think he's going to go in there and take Giga's spot in the top 15. I don't think he finds a finish. Giga has been super durable throughout his career. He's never been knocked out, but I'm going to pick Kevin Vallejos to pick up the decision win. And then we have arrived at the main event, Brandon Royval taking on Manel Kape. I'm praying these guys actually make it to fight day. It's bold of the UFC to count on these two to kind of close out the year because Manel Kape specifically, there's been a lot of cancellations. This fight actually has been scheduled 2 different times on March 1st and June 28th. Royval pulled out of the first one. Kape had to pull out of the second one. That was the fight where Joshua Van came in, earned that number 1 contender spot. But for Manel Kape, since 2022, he has had 5 fights. He has had 9 cancellations. Now, all of those are not on him. They've been kind of back and forth, but certainly not great that he almost has double the cancellations as fights. When he is out there, though, the dude is dangerous. 6-3 UFC record, 5-1 in his last 6. He's a dangerous striker. He's an elite athlete. He is so quick. He is so explosive. He can fight from both stances. He flows through his combinations. He's got so many weapons that he throws out there. He throws every limb from both stances. He mixes his targets really well, works the body, works the legs, obviously works the head. And we've seen in his last 2 fights, he has really kind of, let his shots go, unloaded against Asuel Mabayev, also against Bruno Silva, finished both of those dudes. We have seen him really kind of struggle with the threat of the takedown in his matchups against Mokaev, Nicolau, Pantoja, where there was not a lot of output from him in those matchups. I think fortunately for him, Brandon Royval is not someone who's typically going to a grappling-heavy game plan, so hopefully we do see a very aggressive Manel Kape in this matchup. On the other side with Brandon Royval, he is coming off a Fight of the Year contender loss to Joshua Van. Maybe people would say the Jan Marab fight kind of overtook it. I think heading into that matchup, the Van Royval fight was kind of viewed as the fight of the year. Royval has great cardio, like elite cardio. He pushes a crazy high pace. He landed 215 strikes against Van in a 3-round fight. He landed 145 against Moreno. He landed 124 against Tetsuro Taira, despite getting controlled for half of the fight. Same thing with Pantoja. He was controlled for 16 minutes. He still landed 111 significant strikes. He really likes to pepper his jab out there, throws a lot of 1-2s, will mix in a variety of different kicks, knees, elbows. I think my favorite Brandon Royval moment was, or just fight, I guess also, was the Kai Kara-France fight, where he gets clipped on the feet. He's off balance. Kai Kara-France kind of runs in, and he just whips around with his spinning elbow, returns the favor, also drops Kai Kara-France. So he can be a little bit unorthodox. He's a little bit wild, can be reckless at times, but he's very dangerous. I think sometimes his strengths are also his weaknesses, where he just sometimes can throw too much volume out there. I think his last fight against Joshua Van is a great example of this. In that matchup, he had the range, right? He was the taller fighter. He had the longer reach. He could have been circling, peppering the jab, mixing in the 1-2s. Instead, he just always had to be moving forward. He always had to be throwing something. We even saw in that 3rd round where Van started going to that push kick to the knee. That's a weapon that Royval should be able to use on Van, where Van is the guy who should have to crash in, be super heavy on that front foot. That should not be a weapon that Van is using on Royval, because Royval shouldn't be crashing in when he has the range advantage or the distance advantage. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if he adjusts. It does just kind of seem like that's his style. He wants to go out there. He wants to get into these super fun fights. We've seen him be a very opportunistic grappler, where 9 of his 17 wins have come by submission, but he's only landing 0.67 takedowns per 15 minutes. But he's landing those takedowns at a 75% clip. I think that Brandon Royval should be trying to grapple, at least mix it in, right? Showcase the threat against Manel Kape, but I honestly just don't really think he will. So in this matchup, I just don't really trust the game plan, the fight IQ of Brandon Royval. I think he's going to be too willing to get into a brawl. And in a fight where we're just purely standing, going shot for shot, I just prefer Manel Kape in that style of fight. He has the cardio. He hits so hard. He's so explosive. I think Manel Kape gets the win here. I hate to say it because Brandon Royval is honestly one of my favorite fighters, but I think Manel Kape gets the decision win. And if Royval purely chooses to stand, I also think Manel Kape could be live for a potential finish. Royval did take a lot of damage in his most recent fight. He's very durable, but we have seen him get clipped a few times. So I think he has the tools if he fights, a clean, smart fight from the outside. I just don't think he's going to do it. So Manel Kape by decision. That is my pick for the final fight of 2025. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.